Hey, Eagle fans, it's EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my video I'm doing to check in before the Giants game on the last Sunday of the season. Before we do that, let's take a quick look back at the Washington game last week. I had done a brief reaction video after the game ended with my cousin, but let's look a little bit more at those statistics. Losing a bad game 38-24, you'd think that the statistics would be a lot worse than they are. When you actually look at some of the specific stats, they're actually pretty close. Redskins only had 2 more first downs than we did. Total yardage was very close, only a difference of 20 yards. And even the breakdown of passing and rushing, both teams were throwing the ball all over the place, but both had a hard time establishing the running game. But then once again, you look at time of possession, and it's weighted heavily in favor of the Redskins, and obviously that's been a problem for the Eagles all year. And one of the downsides of Chip's up-tempo offense is it doesn't really give the defense a chance to breathe. And then in terms of penalties, both teams had 8 penalties, and actually the Redskins had more in terms of yardage. But really what it comes down to this is it was the timing of these penalties that were so bad for the Eagles. It stalled some drives for them that really could have kept the Eagles in the game or even given them a lead in the first half. And it was just they came at inopportune times, and that was really where it hurt them. Another stat I really, frankly, couldn't find. I was trying to find exactly what the breakdown of drop passes were in this game between the Eagles and Redskins, and I couldn't find it. I know it was weighted heavily in favor of the Eagles. In fact, one of the stats I did find shows that the Eagles lead the league in drop passes this year, and so that's just another problem that really sort of hurt them, especially when you have one like Aguilar dropping the one he did in the end zone. Stuff like that is really it's hard to overcome when you're doing that. And then the last stat that really it killed us is fumbles. And granted, there was only 2 fumbles that we lost, but you look at the stat of 7 times we fumbled the ball, and granted we were able to recover it 5 times. But there was a stretch of plays there at the one point where the Eagles didn't seem like they could hold on to the ball. And what does Chip Kelly decide to do right after that? He decides to call a pitch play to Marco Murray, and that leads to another fumble that they don't recover, and that leads to D'Angelo Hall touchdown. So once again, just a really bad game in terms of the way it was called, the way it was executed, and it just seemed like it was the Eagles were trying to do everything they could to lose that game. And as I joked in the reaction video afterwards, the Skins tried to keep up with us in the first half, but eventually they got their act together and we didn't, and that ended up being the difference in the game. So there you have it. Kind of like I said last week after the game, we really beat ourselves in that game. And, when I had made my prediction video on that game, I had said that I thought it was going to be which team really made the most mistakes and beat themselves. So I'm not surprised that that's sort of the way it went down. And unfortunately, what it comes right down to is I think Washington just wanted that game more. So it was really a disappointing effort to see the Eagles put out. But obviously, the news coming out of that week dropped Tuesday night when the Eagles fired Chip Kelly. I put up a reaction video to that the night that it happened. I'll put a link below so you can check that video out if you haven't already. But let's go ahead and take a look and see where we go from here. Obviously the coaching search is on. I'm making this video Saturday evening, and there's a report out already. The Eagles have already interviewed Deuce Staley, the running backs coach, and obviously the longtime player for the Eagles has been interviewed. Frankly, I think that's more of a courtesy interview probably. And also, let's not forget that there is the Rooney Rule that's in effect for the NFL. All NFL teams have to interview a coach that's a minority. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if that wasn't sort of a check the box. And it also gives them an opportunity to give Deuce Staley a chance to interview for a top position. So I think it was sort of a benefit for both parties, but I don't really take that seriously. Frankly, the name that I've heard the most that I'm actually probably would be at the top of my list would be Sean McDermott. When we get into, I'll make a video next week that discusses some of the coaches and some of those possibilities to break that down later. But right now, I would say he's my top choice for who I think the Eagles should pursue. So that brings us to this week's game against the New York Giants, and it's really difficult to do any sort of analysis on this game because it's really going to be a question of who shows up for it. It's entirely possible Tom Coughlin is coaching his last game. In fact, if you believe the media reports, he probably is. And Pat Shurmur is an interim coach. So which of these teams is going to have their players show up for sort of this, dead man coach walking going into this game. And even doing statistical analysis on this game is difficult anyway, because frankly, both these defenses stink. They're both lousy when it comes to yardage and points. They're the bottom 5 of both those categories. So it's difficult to really even do a statistical analysis on this game when you really look at it, because so much of it's going to be in terms of who's really going to be able to make some stops, when frankly it doesn't look like either of these defenses can stop anyone. So then it really becomes whether or not the offenses want to show up and play in this game or not. So obviously there's going to be players that are playing for contracts next year and playing for auditions for probably the 2 new head coaches that are going to be coming in for these 2 franchises. But like I said, it's really a question of which of these teams has the players that are going to show up to try and really win this game. As far as my thoughts on the game itself, first of all, as an Eagles fan, we probably actually want them to lose this game for a couple reasons. Number one, obviously the better draft pick. It looks like we could probably draft anywhere from around 9 or 10 if they lose this game, falling all the way back to possibly even down to 17 if they win the game. So frankly, we're much better off with the better draft pick if they lose the game. But beyond that, there's also the reason in terms of scheduling for next year. 2 of the games in the NFL schedule are determined by where you place the year before. And as the 3rd place team in the NFC East, we would play different teams than if we were the 2nd place team in the NFC East, which are the 2 positions we could end up depending on if we win or lose tomorrow. So if you're looking at the specific possibilities for our schedule for next year, if we finish in 3rd, we would actually play in London against the Rams. And if we happen to win tomorrow, we would actually have to play in Seattle next year. So in terms of those 2 NFC West teams, I'd much rather play the Rams than have to go to Seattle and play the Seahawks, where they're very difficult to beat when we have to go on the road to beat them. So frankly, for those reasons, we're much better off if the Eagles actually lose tomorrow. I never like to actively root against the Eagles, but frankly, I think that's what we need to do tomorrow. It's one of the reasons why when I'm looking at this game, for those of you who don't know, I don't live in the Philadelphia area anymore. I live in Maryland, so we don't get the Eagles games here very much. I usually have to go out to watch them somewhere that has the NFL ticket. But tomorrow, I'm just going to be watching the NFL Red Zone because, frankly, I don't want to have to watch the game where really I want my team to lose. I'll be able to see the highlights on the Red Zone, and that'll be good enough for me. But in terms of actually my prediction for this game, like I said, both these defenses stink, so I think it's going to be a shootout. And of course, as disappointing as this season has been, it would surprise me a bit to see the Eagles actually win the game that we want them to lose. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and pick the Eagles in a shootout to win 41-37. Like I said, I'll be checking in next week once the Eagles start announcing some of the coaching candidates they're looking at, and we'll do some quick videos and giving you some thoughts in terms of what I think about them. But until then, fly Eagles fly.